Welcome everybody. I'm Selena Rezvani, and you're joining Women in Work Culture. This is a live stream all about those positive practices for making your workplace more inclusive to women because your business depends on it. I'm so excited today to be joined by Carol Fishman Cohen, who is really the expert of experts on taking a career break and relaunching your career successfully with confidence. Hi, Carol. Welcome.
Hi, Selena. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you and hear from you on a really timely topic, right?
Yes.
Which is how to come back from those breaks. Welcome to all of you too, our community. Drop us a note and let us know where in the world you're joining from today. We see already Bryn Mawr College, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, to name a few. So we're covering a lot of good ground here. Carol, I want to give people a chance to know a little bit about you and some of your awesomeness. You're the chair and co-founder of iRelaunch, which is really a total pioneer in the career reentry space. You all really have carved out that path. Carol gave an awesome TEDx talk that she's known for. It got 3 million views, if you can compute that. It's been translated in about a bajillion languages, all around how to get back to work after a career break. I really love that talk, by the way, because it's so inspiring, but it's equal parts practical too. Carol hosts a popular 321 iRelaunch podcast. And one of my favorite things I want to share with people about you, because I'm a big fan of women and thought leadership, is that you wrote the seminal article for Harvard Business Review on returning to work, right? With the catchiest title, The 40-Year-Old Intern, which I love. And so many people will remember that. We're thrilled to have you, Carol, and community as we go. Please send us your questions for Carol. We know some of you have been in career break situations and are looking forward to relaunching your own careers. So we're going to try to get to those. More people today from Houston, Tampa Bay, Dallas, Florida. So excited to have you. Portugal. Woo! All right, Carol. So to dive right in, and I'm seeing you frozen. Hopefully you'll come back. Can you hear me, Carol? Can you hear me all right? Maybe we had a little glitch of the internet. I'm hoping you come back in a moment. Oh, looks like we lost Carol for a moment. I think she'll be joining us in just a second, probably an internet issue. But while we're waiting, I want to talk about this career break business and share with you, while we wait for Carol to come back and join us, my own experience, my own personal experience dealing with a career break, which is when I off-ramped from my career in speaking and consulting to have my twins. I took 5 months off, and I'll never forget my first gig back out there, getting back to work. I remember getting out my suit out of my wardrobe, taking off my spit-up covered clothes and putting that suit on and honestly feeling like it was a costume, right? Like it might as well have been a Halloween costume. It felt like pretending. It felt like I was a fraud. And it's a moment I'll never forget about losing my own confidence after that career break, right? It was a voluntary career break that to some extent I had planned, but nonetheless, really shook my confidence. And as I look at that time, it took a full year or so for me to regain some of that confidence. And I think some of it kind of gradually increased, gradually came up over time. And I think the thing maybe nobody tells you is later on in the case of being a mom, you get even more confidence, I think, from being a mom. The very things that help you be good at that role can help you be good at work or in building those trusting relationships, right, in your career. So, love hearing from Fernando, who's telling us he's really jumped in and out in his career, and that iRelaunch is a brilliant idea for a business. I just want to check here if our friend Carol's coming back. I certainly think she's probably trying to log back in. So we're going to wait for her for just a minute. But I'd love to hear from you all while we're waiting. Did you have your own career break? And tell us in one word what it was like to try to re-enter. What's one word that comes to mind for you about what it was like to relaunch your own career? Because this isn't something we learn in college. This is not something, people sit us down and tell us how to do. It's kind of without a manual. So what's that word for you? What do you think about when you consider relaunching, coming back in your career? Journey, we're hearing from Sally. Journey. I think that's certainly true. Rarely are our careers a linear path, right? Usually there's some zigging and some zagging, and I love that analogy of journey. We have Carol, wonderful Carol, back with us, and we're excited to have you back.
I'm back. Let me
it's
dive
okay.
right back in.
It's
All right,
okay. It was a live stream break as we talk about career breaks, so very timely.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask you, Carol, is you're not an outsider to this topic looking in. You've lived it yourself. You've experienced it yourself. Would you tell us your own story of being a returner and what led you to start this company?
Sure. So we call people who are returning to work after taking career breaks relaunchers. And I am a relauncher myself, and I've been through every phase of the transition firsthand. I am a financial analyst by trade. I work for an investment bank, and the investment bank I was working for collapsed in February of 1990 while I was on maternity leave with my first child. So I was in corporate finance in their Boston office. The company collapsed. I had no company to return to. So that began my career break. And I ended up having more kids. And I stayed home with those kids for 11 years. And in 2001, I returned to work again as a financial analyst at an investment firm where there were people who knew me from 11 years before. That's how I ended up getting back in the door there, was from colleagues from before who remembered me after all that time. And that's something we talk about now, and we can talk about it later. But I went back. I was there for over a year, and then I decided that I made a big mistake. I didn't do a complete career assessment and figure out what I wanted to do all over again. And so I realized I didn't really want to do financial analysis, and co-authored a book on returning to work after a career break called Back.
Darn. Carol, we can't hear you. At least for me, you went out for a moment there and froze.
But hello, are you
There
still
you
there?
are. You're back.
Okay.
You're back.
I'm really
Yeah.
sorry about this. But in the process of writing that book, we ended up speaking to employers and work-life experts and over 100 relaunchers. But it was the beginning of employers started in 2005, 2006, when we were still turning on our manuscript. it was the beginning of employers who were starting to do return to work programming. Lehman Brothers, that doesn't exist anymore, had a program. UBS had a program. Citi funded a program with Dartmouth's Business School Tuck. So we were in the middle of a lot of those presentations and programming and focus groups. And then we decided we should start iRelaunch because we were getting all this demand from the companies. And it all went from there.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's so valuable. And you've really been at it since organizations, considered this early on. I want to make sure everyone's with us as we talk definitions. Like, how do you define career breaks? I gave an example earlier of my maternity leave, but certainly that's not the only one, right?
So we're talking about multi-year career break, so very distinct from leaving and coming back after a maternity leave. And originally we were focused on career breaks that had to do with childcare reasons, and we were pretty much only focused on that. But now we look at relaunching much more broadly. People who take career breaks for elder care, child care, pursuing a personal interest, a personal health issue. There are men and women who take career breaks. And we even have veterans in some of the return to work programs, or people who have taken career breaks for long-term volunteering, and a whole range of reasons. So it's any long-term, usually multi-year career break from 1 to over 20 years.
That's very helpful. I think as we think about this frame, the multi-year break, which, let's be honest,
Yes.
sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's voluntary.
That's
Sometimes, you might be, it wasn't your choice to kick off that break. We all love some good unadvice, some don't do's. And so I'm wondering if you could share with us a few mistakes people make when trying to return back to work.
Right. Well, first of all, just like I did, when we tell people you have to figure out what you want to do all over again, and that's really a process, and it takes a lot of thought and deliberation and really analysis. Of course, some of that depends on how long your career break is and what your career break experiences were, or maybe it has to do with something that you felt you were always interested in and wanted to do, but just pursued a different track because of your parents' expectations, or because you just fell into something. So there's a lot of thought that goes on there. But so people have to figure that out, and they have to get very specific on exactly what they want to do in order to then be able to find out who has those kinds of jobs and have conversations with them and apply to the right roles and get the right updating in order to make yourself viable as a candidate. So that's really important, is getting specific. Then people don't become subject matter experts again. They don't spend enough time really understanding all the most important issues in their field. This is also important. People are older and they're worried about ageism. To be able to have conversations about the latest thinking in your field and be really on top of all that helps people think more about the content of what you're talking about and less about how old you are or how long your career break is. And finally, people spend a lot of time researching companies online and applying for jobs online, which is, of course, something that has to be a part of your job search, but you have to get out of the house. And I know that means something different right now during COVID than it might normally mean, but get out of the house and go public with your job search. So tell everyone you know that you're interested in returning to work, so your network broadens over time. And we can talk more about that if you want. But those are some of the mistakes that people make, is they don't do those things.
I love that, Carol. Especially my favorite one is around that idea that maybe you can't add to the conversation about what it's like inside that company's culture right now, but you can about the industry or the news, right? Or the headlines, or the trends that people are seeing. So I love the idea of controlling what you can control. When we had our little blip there for a minute, I shared a story about my own hit to confidence, something I experienced when coming back, not even after a year break. I wondered, I know I'm not the only one who's felt that confidence hit, the self-doubt. What do you recommend for people who are feeling that on a career break?
I'm really glad you brought this up, Selena, because when you think about it, our society attaches so much importance to our complete identity with the piece about our professional identity, what we do for work. That's what people always ask you about when you first meet. And when you take that away for an extended period of time, you become professionally disconnected, you can experience a diminished sense of self. And you can have that happen in social events when people, as soon as you say that you're on a career break, some people aren't that interested in talking to you and they're moving on to the next person. That, there's a lot of societal judgment about that too. So that's what contributes to our diminished sense of self. And that's why the relaunch is not just a regular job search, because there is that confidence piece and you need to build it back up again. And there are very specific ways you can build back up that confidence. One is when you become a subject matter expert, you feel more confident because you're very conversant in who's talking about the controversies in your field and who the experts are and what the big issues that people are thinking through and some of the terminology. So that helps your confidence. It also helps your confidence to when you're very specific about what you want to do, to practice talking about it out loud over and over and over again, almost like it's a script and you're in a theater performance, because the more comfortable you get telling your story, then the more confident you're going to feel. And the other piece of it, and this has to do with when I got back in touch with all those people from the past who I used to work with and they remembered me, is those people from the past will have what we call a frozen in time view of you. So even if you have a diminished sense of self, they don't know anything about that. They only remember you as you were. And that's a confidence builder too, to be back in touch with those people and hear their enthusiasm about your interest in returning to work.
That's huge, your last point. I don't think most of us consider that fact about the network. We think, oh, that person's surpassing me, or they're chugging along while I was out. They must be, miles ahead in some way or another. So I love your mindset shift there, that frozen in time image. Use that to your advantage and use that to build your own confidence. You're getting a lot of likes for your comments on that, Carol. Are there good ways to tap or reach out to that network, that you might recommend to folks?
Yeah. So in terms of networking, one besides telling everyone about your interest in returning to work, and that could mean, if your career break is for childcare reasons and you're sitting next to some other parent in the stands watching a sporting event, that you get into a conversation about what they do and then they ask you what you do, and that gives you an opportunity to talk to that kind of person who you might not even know that well. We also say, don't forget about people who were junior to you, people who you work with, people whom you mentored, maybe they reported to you, or maybe you just knew them, because those junior people have been moving up while you've been on career break. And sometimes they're in a position to open a door for you. And that's exactly what happened to me when I relaunched in 2001. I know it sounds like a long time ago, but it's still very relevant today. Is a junior person who was junior to me when we worked together on investment banking teams ended up during my 11-year career break becoming a managing director at this investment firm. He's the one who opened the door for me to go interview there. And we have plenty of relaunchers who are working for people who used to work for them. And I will add, for people who might be watching who are anticipating a future career break, to think about nurturing those relationships with people who are junior to you now, because if you do end up taking that career break later, they can be very important people. And sometimes because they were junior, you had that relationship with you, they love being in that role to be helping you.
I love that. Yeah, I can think of a director I know in my own world who is known as a really awesome boss of a team, but that person may not be thinking, let me access those people I used to manage. So I think that's a really brilliant nugget here. I want to pivot a little bit to talking about the flip side, not so much the individual, but the employer. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what returnship means. What is a returnship program? And what's kind of the landscape out there of these programs?
So one of the major some of the major work that we do at iRelaunch is we work with over 100 companies on in-house return to work programs, and they do take different forms. Most of them are what you, as you referenced, returnship based, which essentially means think about a college summer internship tweaked for a mid-career professional. So they're not usually during the summer, they're during different parts of the year, they're paid. They are short-term opportunities, anywhere from 8 weeks to 9 months. Most of them are 12 to 16 weeks, where people participate in a cohort. They move through the program together, and they have a role, and they have an opportunity, the employer and the relauncher, to test out that working relationship. So this is what I wrote about in the 40-year-old intern, that from the employer perspective, especially if an employer attaches risk to hiring people who are coming off of a multi-year career break, that the returnship concept lowers the perceived risk because you're allowed to test out that working relationship before making the hiring decision. And you can make the hiring decision based on a series of interviews, and I mean, based on an actual work experience instead of a series of interviews. And then the other types of return to work programs are what we call direct hire, where someone is hired in right from day one as an employee, but there's still some sort of loose cohort or professional development or mentoring that they get as they're transitioning back. And then there are programs that we call event-based return to work programs, which are usually 1 or 2 day workshops that a company screens and selects people for, and they participate in that, and that becomes a pool from which they then recruit from.
Yeah, this is so exciting. I think for all, this is what modern work sounds like. This is what the modern workplace should be. So we're excited to be hearing some of these messages. I love the idea of the cohort in particular, that you can kick the tires, both of you, the employer and the employee, to kind of see the fit. How do I like this? And test drive it. But I'd imagine there's also a support element to the cohort. Do
Yes.
they get to support each other at all?
So the returnships are usually cohort based. So people are in a group. It could be 3 people. It could be 33 people. And they usually have an orientation where they're all together, even if they might then be in different locations. They get mentors and buddies, and they have ongoing programming. There's a program manager. There are executives who meet with them. So it's a very there's a lot of quality programming that goes into their experience, in addition to, of course, their primary role of the work that they're doing. But the power, I actually wrote another article for Harvard Business Review called "The Power of the Cohort in Career Reentry Programming," to go through this experience together as a group when you're such an unusual kind of hire within the company. Very different from when I returned and I was this one-off hire just kind of on my own. To go through this program as a cohort means that the people in it really support each other personally and professionally. And I should add that these programs are really successful. We measure them in terms of their conversion rates, what percentage of the people who are in these internship programs then convert to being hired afterward. And it's over 80% on average. So we're getting some great numbers, and we have so many companies now running programs, and sometimes multiple programs a year. We have a lot of data points now, and we feel very confident about this model being a great way to transition people back to work after career breaks.
That's awesome to see the numbers back up what you probably already knew, right? And I think there's a lot of parallels with women's leadership as well, that women in those cohorts don't only gain resources, but the affinity factor. Getting to have a shared experience is meaningful and valuable. One of the things I loved about your TEDx was there are a lot of success stories of individuals in it. Really inspiring stories of people who rocked that career break and really made it work for them. Would you share from the other side maybe a success story of an employer that's done a good job here?
Right. So the history of these return to work programs started in 2008 with Goldman Sachs' program, which is actually called Returnship. And also Sara Lee that year started a program called Returnships at Sara Lee, but Sara Lee got restructured and that program went away. And then in 2013, JP Morgan Chase started their reentry program. And then in 2014, Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse and MetLife started their programs. Then after that, we started to see a real proliferation of these programs. And one of the driving forces was, and is, a collaboration that we at iRelaunch have with the Society of Women Engineers called the STEM Reentries Task Force. And we have 32 corporate giants that are part of that program now. 22 have launched their own in-house return to work program. Most are returnships, some are direct hire programs. And I'll just say for success rate as a group, we've had over 600 relaunchers go through STEM Reentry Task Force programs, and 86% of them have been hired. So not only are we seeing more and more companies join the task force every year, but we're seeing the programs at each company are getting bigger and bigger. So for example, one of the things that we do is we run an employer regular speaker series that we just started actually because of COVID. And our last speaker was Liz Marcus from Johnson & Johnson, who is the dedicated program manager there, who has grown that program from a handful of people into a global program. And we've seen that at IBM, and we've seen that now with the combined Raytheon Technologies, the combination of United Technologies and Raytheon. So we're seeing a number of many success stories. Those are a few of programs that have grown globally and are expanding exponentially.
Wow, that's so awesome to hear some of those before and afters. For a company that wants to do this, maybe, is at the very beginning drawing board, is there a baby step they could take forward to get a program like this going, or a first step?
Yes, I would tell them, come join us, our employer virtual speaker series every other Tuesday. The next one is June 16th. Employers have to register in order to attend, but there's no fee. And learn from the program managers who are running the successful programs and talk about all the issues that are the most important in terms of sourcing and compensation and classification and what do the orientations look like. We talked about all those issues. So I'd say that's a great starting point. And of course, you can talk to us at iRelaunch about how maybe you just go onto our job board and post a single job because you want to open up the pool of who's applying to relaunchers. So maybe that's a baby step. And then later you think about a formal program. So that might be an example.
I like that a lot, the awareness first and taking advantage of the speaker series. Why reinvent the wheel, right? Well, you really struck a nerve looking at some of the comments, especially around that confidence issue, people talking about imposter syndrome and things like that, feeling like a dinosaur. That's a strong metaphor, right, for sometimes how it feels to be on a break. So I'm really glad we touched on that. As a last parting truth bomb, as we call it, a final thought, what is a kind of single piece of advice you would want to leave people with as they consider that return to work? What's most important?
Well, I want to talk about it in the context of what's happening right now with COVID, with the economic collapse that we've seen, 25 million people unemployed, because relaunchers say to us, where do I fit into that, where all these people are unemployed? And now, how am I ever going to get a job? And so we point out to employers that relaunchers are unemployed too. We might not, fall into the specific definition to be in the statistics, but we tell relaunchers that they should follow many of the same strategies that you would normally follow, but you also have to do a lot of filtering out. You have to do a lot of filtering out of the economy is horrible. Oh, isn't everyone looking for a job right now? And remain very, very focused on exactly what you want to do and being relentless about going after that. I wrote an article that was published by NBC News, Know Your Value, recently, and it's 12 job search tactics from people who got hired during the last recession. So I would recommend that people look at that because we give 12 very specific tactics that people should think about, especially in this environment.
That's huge. That's huge. We talk about that sometimes in my company as don't tell yourself no before they do,
That's
right?
exactly right.
Don't internalize every news headline or scary trend and think that's the end, that's the conclusion. That's so awesome. You know, Carol, it's very clear to see your passion and commitment and really smart takeaways here. So I'm so grateful to you for the work you do, truly, as somebody who's been on breaks. And I think the best thing you're doing is giving people an encouraging take. This is not, here's a defect, here's a way you've been sidelined in your career. You're helping people reimagine this positively. And so I thank you for that. You must check out Carol's website, her awesome TEDx talk. These are all in the show notes coming to you. Her recent articles that you're going to see, and follow her here on LinkedIn if you're not already, and on Twitter and other social. I hope you'll stay in touch with me too. Check out some of my LinkedIn learning courses to give you that confidence to launch yourself into all kinds of new things. Be part of my newsletter tribe. Follow me here on LinkedIn. I want to thank you all for joining today. I hope you stay healthy, well. That remember to see your own value first if you want other people to see your value. And lead on. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank